All right, Bert, we got some breaking news from Leafs GM Brad Treliving as we're recording this pod. Your boy, speaking of cap casualties and all that stuff.
My boy.
John Klingberg, it was announced that he was going to have hip surgery at the end of the month, essentially ending his season, essentially ending his time with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Quickly, your thoughts on that, Albert?
Yeah, bad news for John Klingberg. Obviously, hopefully the guy recovers well and he can play again, but it looks like that's probably not going to happen, at least for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's good news for the Toronto Maple Leafs because the team that's up against the cap now gets some salary relief. What do they sign him to, $4.1 million?
Yeah.
It's a big number for a guy with a bum hip. And I just feel like Brad Treliving dodges a massive bullet here. I thought this was a horrible signing. You bring in a guy with an injury who's not really a very good defenseman to help with the defense. So the deal never made sense. But now moving forward, you have some cap room. I want to see what Treliving is going to do right now. And he was actually asked about that. And it sounds like they're investigating the market, but whatever, yeah, that's the word he used. But
just say you're searching the market.
And he's essentially saying if the price doesn't make sense, then maybe we won't make a move. I'm paraphrasing there, but that's kind of how I read what he said.
Yeah, I mean, look, like investigating all this stuff, the right price. I kind of ties back to what you mentioned in the first block about how this might be like a wait-and-see approach for Brad Treliving this season.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of just a wrong way to approach it. When you have guys in the prime of their careers, you have guys that are playing at the top of their game or near there, and you need to take full advantage of it. I think when you look at this situation with the Toronto Maple Leafs, it also would boost the morale, don't you think, knowing that your front office has your backing and bringing in a defenseman, whether he's a bottom third pair or a top forward guy, right? Just the simple fact that your front office believes enough in you as a team, as a group to invest so you guys can push forward to the playoffs. I think this is a great disservice to the players and also the coaches, right? That Brad Treliving is not moving quick enough, right? He's not making a move. Sometimes it's good to play the field and see where things may lay, but also it might be a good time to be the tone setter, right? Go out there and set the tone. Show everybody in the league that, hey, look, we have problems on our defense, but we're going to address them right away. And they haven't done that yet, Albert. And I think that's why you're asking Joseph Woll to play very, very well, going back to the goalie conversation. But we know that's not sustainable. At least I think it's not sustainable for a season long, right? Max Lajoie, Simon Benoit, William Lagesson, these guys are playing well, right? They're not making egregious errors on a nightly basis, but eventually that's going to happen, right? Eventually something like that's going to happen. So, look, I think Brad Treliving is doing a major disservice to this team by not acting upon it yet, by investigating. Just act upon it. Do what you got to do. Say what you have to say to get through the media, but I want to see some action out of Brad Treliving and address this defense core because sooner rather than later, your players are going to notice that you're not really helping your team this season. You're kind of assessing, and it might damage the morale in the locker room.
Yeah, I think a move does happen because you have to bring in a defenseman. Liljegren looks like he's coming back. He's been involved. He's been on the practice ice, not practicing with the team, so he should be back
skating
sooner rather than later. You have Giordano, who's done for 4 to 6 weeks, so you have to address it. Does that mean they bring in a top pairing defenseman? Maybe not. Maybe it's just another depth defenseman, but a move needs to be made. And listen, I'm with you. It doesn't paint him in a good light if he's not making any moves, but I also understand that this is a position that he wasn't expecting to be in with all these injuries, and now the market knows that you're desperate. You're kind of held against a fire a little bit, and you might have to pay a price that you weren't expecting to pay. And I think maybe if it reaches a point where he feels like he needs to give up, let's just say a Matthew Knies or a first rounder, maybe at this moment in time, Treliving is not willing to make that move because maybe he believes in his team. By adding maybe a few depth defensemen that they can still make a push for the Stanley Cup. I'm not sure what his thoughts are, but I can understand the position that he's dealing with.
Absolutely. Look, like we know that if you're going to want to acquire players, you're going to have to retain salary to acquire these top-end defensemen, and that requires a sweetener. It could be Knies, could be this pick, could be whatever, right? A price that they kind of knew they would have to pay, I don't know if they thought it would rise as much as it has, was William Nylander and his contract extension. We touched on it with the cap space opening up, but president of hockey operations, Brendan Shannon, spoke to TSN's Gino Reda and had this to say about William Nylander and his contract situation.
The way Nylander's been playing and the price just seems to be going up and up and up. And you said it, it's a tight cap era.
Well, I think if you're getting concerned because you have players on your team,
I'm just saying, try to keep them financially viable in that situation. That's all.
Like I said, I think if you get concerned because you have players on your team playing really good hockey, then you've got to really check yourself. Look, I'm not going to talk about the details of that, but more focus right now is for all of us as a group and as individuals to just continue to improve. I think that these close games and tight games could be a benefit to us.
No worries, or maybe some worries from Brendan Shanahan. Look, man, we know that Nylander has played exceptional this year. We know he's been the least best player, most consistent player, even though the historic streak did come to an end. But Albert, it's pretty much a lock that he's going to sign in Toronto, I think, and I don't think there's any other questions that should be answered about that.
Well, once again, I don't think that's the case. It sounds that way, and it's going towards that. Nylander's even talking about, back when Matthews was signed, how he felt about it and how happy he was. He's like, who wouldn't want to play here in Toronto? So Nylander wants to be here. But back to what Shanahan said. To be honest, he didn't really say much. What did he say? If you're concerned about players playing well, then you got to check yourself. I don't know. We rarely hear from Brendan Shanahan. I never know what to expect. I don't expect too much, to be completely honest with you. What's he really going to say about that entire situation? It'd be nice to get some clarity in terms of where they are in negotiations, but it looked like just a quick, stop and chat. It almost looked like him and Gino Reda just happened to bump into each other in the hallway at the Board of Governors meeting, and it's like, hey, Shanahan, want to talk? And that's what happened. So I read nothing into what he said other than, listen, we have a really good player, and that's as far as that goes.
Look, I think Nylander, the contract situation it's going to get resolved soon, because I think they would have traded him. They would have traded him by now, right? If they had any inclination that it wasn't going to get done. You agree. I do agree with you.
So what happens, and I kind of mentioned this in the first segment of this podcast, but what happens if they get closer to March, if they're in February and they still haven't signed Nylander?
I mean, you got to ride it out and hope that...
Ride it out?
You have to. You can't trade him now, right?
Yeah.
You ride it out and you see what happens then, right? You ride it out,
I think you make a move, and you might not get exactly what you want, but it's better than the guy walking away at the end of the season.
I don't know, man.
That's the position that they're in. Look, this is almost like Raptors, Freddie, Van Fleet situation.
No, because with the Raptors, they were trying to get one last push out of the playoffs, and okay, let me ask you
what I'm saying is that he walked away. They got nothing for him.
Yeah, but I don't think William Nylander is going to walk away, because I think the Leafs can afford to pay him what he wants. They just won't be able to pay anybody else, right? But also, where else would you want to go if you're William Nylander? Do you want to take more money but then play on a losing, horrible team? I don't know.
No, it's clear these guys want to stay in Toronto.
Exactly,
the benefits of staying in Toronto, you can do commercials for Rogers on Subways and
TTC.
Sick Kids and Hudson Bay and Michael Bublé. You get the benefits of playing in Toronto. I completely understand. But listen, you got to be the team and the organization and the franchise always has to be above the player. And they need to take a stand. Listen, this is what we're willing to pay you. You want more. We cannot give that to you. You don't want it? All right, then you got to move. It's as simple as that.
I mean, look, I think the Nylander situation, it's a game. It's a media game. They're not going to say much. The other side's not going to say much. You're just going to try to keep it under wraps, and then when it's announced, it's announced. But then that means that, look, Brad Treliving, the clock is ticking, right? If you're going to sign another guy to another big ticket deal, right? Again, back to what we were talking about, it's time to make a move. Do something, man. It's really imperative that, yes, these guys are going to be signed, but how are you going to insulate them? Be creative, do something. And we've yet to see that with Brad Treliving, Albert. And I think that's just the most frustrating part with this whole thing, is that if I'm a player and I'm a coach and I see this guy just keep on going out to the media and saying, oh, we're investigating, doing this, that, and the third. I see John Klingberg going LTIR. I don't see any reinforcements coming in. I get frustrated as a player and as a coach because I'm getting shorthanded when I'm going out there every night, battling against every other team in the Eastern Conference. And like you mentioned, Albert, they're in no clear playoff position right now. They're battling right now. And as a player, that's very, very frustrating.